Good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of Sounds of the Diaspora, artist to artist conversation with Dion Parson. Welcome to the show, and I would like for you to join me in welcoming my guest this week, one of my mentors, a great friend, composer, drummer, educator, and band leader. Please welcome Mr. Nasar Abadey.
Hey there, how are you doing?
I am great, man. It's good to see you. It's really
It,
good to see you.
it's better to see you, man, because it's been a long time. The last time we saw each other, it was winter time, and it
Mhm.
was where was that? What city was that? That was out west
We was in Dallas.
in Dallas. That's where it
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
yeah,
man.
for the Gen
The
conference.
Gen Conference. Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. It was
Yes,
good to
sir.
see you again, man. Yes.
Yes, sir. It's always a pleasure, man. And every time we see each other, we got so many stories to tell and information to share. So
Yes.
I'm excited to have you on the show because I want our audience to experience what I experience when I have a conversation with you.
Oh, thank you,
That's
man.
why this called a conversation. Because you have so much information to share, man, and I want them to hear that.
Thank you so much, man. I'm honored as well and excited. So thank you very much for having me.
You're more than welcome, man. So you're down in the DMV area down in Washington D.C. and is that where you're from originally?
Originally, I was born in Pittsburgh.
Okay,
However, my family migrated from there when I was 5 years old to Buffalo, New York, and that's where I was raised and went to school.
in Buffalo, but Pittsburgh, man. Pittsburgh have a well. Put it this way, I don't want to say a history. I'm gonna be real and just say it's notorious for
It is, man. It's
you got
well,
the drummers, man, or Blakey and you and Tane, and I mean a whole bunch of plethora of
that's right.
musicians has come out of there.
Roger
Roger
Humphreys,
Humphreys, who's still
yeah,
around, he's doing
still
his
around,
thing.
still with
Yeah,
us. Yes.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was fortunate to do a tour with Jerry Allen of the Blue Notes in Japan many years ago.
Okay.
Dwayne Dolphin was the bass player.
Oh yeah, from
Yeah,
Pittsburgh. Yeah, I haven't
Pittsburgh.
seen
Yeah,
him now.
so you guys have a history of just
Yeah, there's
producing some of the greats.
Yeah, that's true, man. A lot of guys came out of Pittsburgh, and every time I go there, especially when I was younger, my family would go there, and I'm from the Hill District. That's where my family lived when I was born, and
Mhm.
that's where the music is. The Hill District, man. That's where, everything was happening, and I remember when I became an adult, when I would go back there, I would go to some of those clubs, the Hurricane and a few of those other clubs, and just amazing, man, to catch that music in Pittsburgh. And what I noticed when I travel around, especially if I stay in a place for a certain while, I can tell that there is a sound that goes with that particular region.
Mhm.
Chicago has a sound, Pittsburgh has a sound, Cleveland has a sound, New York has a sound. It's funny because New York sound is such a potpourri of people that moved there from where they came, and it's almost like when you get there, you do what you do, you learn you bring what you brought there, but then when you live there for a while, it's almost like you put on a coat and it says New York.
Yeah,
When you leave New York to go elsewhere, you've got the New York vibe with
you
you.
got that New York vibe,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, man.
it
But
never leaves you, and it never leaves you.
exactly, exactly. That's great, man. That's great to hear that. So Pittsburgh was your where you were born, but how did when did you know that you were going to be you wanted to pursue drums? When did that start? I know you started at 5 years old, but
It was my grandfather.
okay.
My grandfather was a Shriner, and he would march in the parades. And when I was old enough, he would take me with him. So I'm walking with him in the parade. And I remember in front of me were drummers, and
Mhm.
behind us were drummers. And I could feel the vibration of the drums and the sticks hitting the drums in my chest.
Wow.
That's all I can remember about that, is that is the first thing that got my attention with the drums, how my chest would vibrate especially with the bass drum and the cymbals player and then the snare drummers. I was gone then, man. And then my parents bought me one of those little drum kits that they sold back then that was made out of cardboard. And I tore them up, and they put tape on the heads and everything. But I remember playing on those drums, man. And then from there, my parents migrated to Buffalo, New York, and when we did, the place where we stayed was with Frankie Dunlop
Okay.
is my cousin, and
Okay.
my mother's brother and I'm sorry, my mother's father, my grandfather, and Frankie's father were brothers.
Okay.
And so when I lived there with them for a while, and Frankie used to practice upstairs in an attic, and I'd go up there and just watch him. And one day he saw me looking at him, and he took a break. He said, "Well, man, you dig? You like this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to play?" I said, "Yeah." And he sat me down to the set of drums. My feet didn't touch the pedals, but I was able to sit on the stool and some sticks in my hand, and that was my first time really playing a real drum.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
then it's ironically, uh, some years went by when he left Buffalo. Some years went by. He went to New York, and when I was 12 or 13 years old, I used to have a transistor radio in my bed, in the headboard.
Mhm.
I had sliding headboard doors, and I would keep a transistor radio there, and I would put this radio on in the morning, especially on the weekends, and I heard Thelonious Monk.
Mm.
Monk's Dream was the exact album, Monk's Dream. And I said, that sounds like Frankie. Now, how would I know that sounds like Frankie? 5 years old. I hadn't heard him since I was 5 or 6 years old.
Mhm.
And so I said, wow, and then when they announced the song, they said that was Frankie Dunlop. I said, wow. And that
Wow.
made me even more want to go into some drums. Now, by that time, I didn't have any drums. I didn't
Mhm.
get my first set of drums till I was 16.
Check that out.
Yeah, 16 years old. And one of the guys that taught me the first thing on drums was was an uncle of a friend of mine who went to school with Frankie.
Okay.
And so he taught me triplets and moving the triplets from the snare to the tom, like Art Blakey would do.
Mhm.
And that was my first understanding of moving rhythms around. And ironically, uh, I got a request from some some girls who had a sorority, and they were putting on a party, and they asked me if I knew any musicians that could play at their party. And I
Mhm.
said, yeah. So I was hanging out with some guys who had instruments, but the drummer didn't have drums. So I asked Pete, was his name, if I could borrow his drum. He said, yeah, man, I borrowed his drum. Played my first gig.
Okay.
on-
With no lessons up until that point.
No lessons, man. I played drums, and then the other drummer, me and him switching, we would play bongos and drums.
Mhm.
And I kept the drums for a day or two, brought them home, set them up in the living room, and my mother came home from work, and she stood in the kitchen because she heard me playing. And then I stopped, and she opened the door. She said, I didn't know you play drums like that. And 2 years later, man, I saw a drum kit in a music store, and I asked my parents if I could get them, and my father co-signed for me to get them. And that was a blue Premier kit. It was my first kit. My second kit was the Ludwig, like what you're playing now. Then
Mhm.
my third kit was Gretsch. My fourth kit are the Sonars now. Yeah,
Wow. So that's man. So the destiny was already there. It
it was
was
there.
like
It was
predestined.
there, man. All I
So
all I ever wanted to do was just play.
yeah. Well, I could tell that. I could I could tell that. That's obvious. Yeah. But that's a beautiful story, man. I really, that's one of the things I like about this show. You like you get to learn about your heroes and your colleagues and stuff. I never knew that about you. A lot of times we see musicians that we idolize and we just think that they just always been that way and we never know their
Yes.
journey.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. So where did you end up going to school to study music?
Well, that happened kind of strangely because I really didn't. I remember my first lesson was in first grade, and uh, there was a teacher there that didn't teach drums, but he taught band,
Mm-hmm.
and he taught me how to play. Told me to get some sticks, and he got me a book called. You remember the Rubank books? They had all kinds of instruments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I got one of those books, and he taught me double stroke and 5-stroke roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took that, and I just kept my sticks, kept my pad, but I would also play on my mother's furniture.
Yeah.
The arms of her chair. You know what I'm talking.
I'm guilty of that.
You dig on the ironing board. On the telephone book, whatever surface. I tore up a lot of stuff, man. But then I didn't get my first lesson until it was before I went to college, and there was a school in Buffalo called the Elmwood School of Music, and they just taught straight music. They didn't really teach jazz, but they taught straight music. And I got with this guy, and he was teaching me. Matter of fact, I'm using one of the books he gave me back then called Four-Way Coordination. Remember that?
Yeah, four-way coordination. Yeah,
the first one to turn me on to that book.
Mm-hmm.
But I left him because he, I saw Tony when I was 17,
Mm-hmm.
and he showed me how Tony played, how he thought Tony played 7 Steps to Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And he just played single strokes from cymbal to the snare, right? Three strokes on the snare, one on the cymbal. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, Tony didn't play it like that.
Tony did the paradiddles.
Yeah. He said, yes, he did. No, Tony didn't do the paradiddle. Tony did doubles. Dot, 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 dot. He put the first beat on the cymbal, mm-hmm. which he got from Art Blakey, actually.
Da, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And he said, oh, he played it like that. I said, yeah, that's how Tony played it. Because mm-hmm. everybody thinks, because they didn't see. I don't even think that there's any video of Tony playing 7 Steps to Heaven. And it was just a double stroke roll that he put the first downbeat on the cymbal and the other strokes. So he slid. There you go. When you go back and listen to it, it sounds so smooth. And right. That's why it sounds so smooth. So I figure, well, if he couldn't figure that out, then I need another teacher.
Okay, yeah.
So
I hear you.
So I think another year later, I wound up going to the University of Buffalo.
Okay.
And I got with a teacher that taught me snare drum. He taught me snare drum, timpani, and he started me on vibes. Actually, on marimbas.
Okay. So I'm sorry, what's his name?
Jan Williams. Jan.
Okay. So did you do like a music education degree, or you just did straight music?
I did straight music, but I didn't stay there long. I stayed there. I was gone less than 2 years because New York was calling.
Right.
I wanted to go to New York, man. And I had already, I went out to California to the Bay Area. That didn't work out. The music wasn't there like I thought it would be. And I was there maybe under a year, and I came back, and then I started going back and forth to New York, and New York just took over. So I left school because I couldn't keep it up. Couldn't keep up going to school in Buffalo and then going down to New York to play gigs and all that, and just do all of that.
You spent half the day just on the road traveling.
That's right, man. That was an 6 to 8 hour drive, depending upon which way you go.
Yeah,
And so I did that for a while, but when I got to New York, I got into the Jazzmobile, and Freddie Waits was my teacher there. I studied with Freddie Waits.
Okay.
While I was at UB, I studied with Joe Chambers. He was teaching there as a result of Archie Shep and Jackie Mack. They had the jazz studies program there, and they brought Joe up there, and I got lessons from him there. and then I got lessons from Freddie Waits in New York, and Billy Hart. Billy, I still will pick Billy's brain.
Oh yeah, Jabali.
Yeah. And then and while in New York, I got sick, physically sick. Came down with Bell's palsy.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and which meant I had to go back to New York and heal myself. And while there, and it took me a while to get that together. While there is when Joe Ford and another tenor saxophone player by the name of Paul Gresham and I, who hung out a lot, played a lot together and everything in different bands, we decided to put a band together called Birthright. And we formed our own record company, formed a partnership, and formed a distributing business where we were distributing our product. And that was in the mid 70s, you know. So I was back there doing that, and I never got back to New York. When I did leave the next time I left, I was thinking to go to New York, but my wife, who was then my fiance, was living here going to school. And you met her.
Yeah.
And I came here, and it was my second time being in DC, because I came to DC, I think with Doug and Gene Carn was the first time I came to DC. And I liked it. A lot of Black people. And so I said, well, I could probably make a living here. And that's how I happened to wind up in Washington, DC.
See, I didn't know that. I always thought you were from DC because of, you know, your strong connection there and all of the folks that you've been associated with.
Yeah, well, it was in DC. DC opened things up for me, and I didn't want to be further away from New York than DC.
Yeah,
and that was good, because I many times I would go up to New York and play gigs and come back, go to New York, play gigs, but I never really established a living quarters there. I would stay with somebody while I was in New York.
Right.
Play a gig, hang out, and come back down here. Then that got old. You know what I mean? You could doing that all the time. It got old. Then I did some tours coming out of New York. People would call me up to New York, and we'd go out on a tour or something like that. And that worked. And but I just started working here more. And then guys were coming down from New York and other places who knew me in New York and would just call me to make the gigs with them here or in the region, you know, New York, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, you know, North Carolina, places like that. Yeah.
It's really interesting how the relationships, you know, building relationships work, because when I met you back in '87, I just finished up my second year of undergraduate studies at Rutgers University, and I went back to St. Thomas to hang out for the summer. And luckily, they were putting on this jazz festival, the first jazz festival ever in the Virgin Islands. And you came down to perform with Gary Bartz, and that's when we met. And so for me, it was like, you know, Nasar Abadey, you know, the great drummer from Washington, D.C., and then, you know, Gary Bartz, you know, the saxophonist. And Gary and I, you know, actually Gary played on our first CD with the 21st Century Band. He was the guest artist on that CD, because of from '87, and we did the CD in '98. Through the whole time, Ron was studying with him, and I played occasionally some gigs with him, and we are connected with, you know, through Steve, working with Steve Turrentine. So he was a guest on that. But that was my initial connection with you and the whole DC crew.
Man.
And yeah, man, and it just opened up a whole nother world for me.
Oh man, I'm so happy to hear that, you know. And that was a great gig for me, because I had just started playing with Gary. I think 2 months before I would sub for the drummers that wasn't able to play a gig with him, so I would sub. Then one day I'm on the gig, and he asked the audience, he said, "Hey everybody, how you like my new drummer?" That's how I found out I was in the band. And then a couple of weeks later, he said, "Yeah, we're going down to St. Thomas next month."
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that's how that worked out for me. It was great.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, it's relationships, man, because here it is, you know, 30 something years later.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're still connected and having great conversations, man. And I'm still learning from you. I'm, you know, I never knew your background, and it's funny because through just coming back now, I live in St. Thomas, but I come back to New York quite often. One of my most memorable moments was going to a club and hearing this young drummer play, and I was like, "Who's that?" They was like, "Man, that's Kush." I'm like, "Kush, Kush." And I'm thinking, like, I only know one Kush in this world. Yeah, be is like, "Yep, Kush Abadey on drums."
Oh man, yeah.
So
Yeah.
this, that's just how life is, man. A circle, man.
It
Yeah.
is. It's a circle, man, and I'm proud. I'm proud of Kush, and I'm proud of the fact that he learned several ways from me. I would teach him little things, and when he was 2 years old, one day he had a stick in his hand, and I had a camera, video camera, and he took the stick and did like that, and I said, "Oh, that's a natural." That's natural. And so I said, well, if he wants to be a drummer, I can help him out. So actually, I taught him how to play a role on a bongo when he was 18 months old, how to just bounce the stick, just let it bounce. And from there, it went on to that's all he did, just watch videos. I took him to every gig I did. He watched me play. I would hear he had a little miniature drum kit for kids, and I'd hear him down in the basement working on something, and I go down and say, "Kush, this is what you're looking for," and I show it to him, then I leave and let him go, And then sometimes I'd be down there practicing, or I'd be down there rehearsing with the band. He would just come down and sit down there and watch me. And so that was some of our exchanging of information on playing the drums, but also I would take him to concerts to see people. Yeah. He saw all the great. He met all the great. He met Max. He met Roy Haynes. And I took him, Cindy Blackman, Ralph Peterson, all these people. I would take him to see these people. And when he got to New York, it was already that he had acquaintances with some of those people. And they knew who he was, Yeah.
He's doing a great job, man. I enjoy hearing him, man. When I heard him, I was taken away, knowing that he was your son, and I was proud,
Thank you.
Just to see, which lends, to the great work you're doing as an educator. I want to talk about you as an educator because, you've been holding it down in the DC area for a long time, quiet as it kept. You've produced a lot of great talent, and you're at John Hopkins Peabody Conservatory. Yes. How long have you been there?
19 years.
Yeah.
February will be 20 years. And I came in half a year. In other words, I came in the spring semester.
Okay. And your role as percussion instructor, jazz studies.
Yeah,
jazz
I teach jazz. They call it jazz percussion there. And I also teach, I have a combo that I lead. And I also have some very fine drummers coming through those combos. And I also teach jazz history. And what we call is jazz analysis history, or jazz history analysis, because basically I'm helping the young people to understand not only the history, but how does it fit together? And what do you expect to hear during a certain time? I'm sure you have had the experience I'm getting ready to cite, where you will talk to a student and you'll ask them, well, who do you listen to? Who influences you right now? And they'll throw out a name. And then you say, well, who influenced them? Who do they listen to? Right. I don't know. Well, that's where it starts. That's what this class is all about. This is what you're here for. You're here to learn how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Right. Yeah. Because that's important, because the influences of our heroes, it's important to know why they sound the way they sound.
Yes.
Who helped to shape their sound.
Yes.
It's very important, because Max Roach compared to AT, compared to Roy Haynes, three different concepts.
It's different.
Three completely different concepts.
But the funny thing is, you can hear the same track.
Yeah.
You can hear the same journey, but you can hear where they got off, and say, okay, I'm gonna stop in this town. I think I'm gonna make it over here.
Right. Yeah.
They, and you know, one of the stories I got, and I love speaking with the older musicians, because one of the stories I got, and speaking of Max, is that when Eddie, uh, um, Ed Blackwell,
Mhm.
when he got to New York, he studied with Max, and when Billy Higgins got to New York, he studied with Ed Blackwell. So it just, yeah, it just went, and went now, knowing that now you can listen to them and you
And
can hear,
here, yeah,
you can hear it,
yeah.
you know, and it's just good to be able to take that and put a microscope on it so you can understand how this thing traveled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, I'm glad you're doing that, because you grew up in a lot of that history. So
Yeah.
you're not only telling it from the academic side, you're sharing it from your own personal experience, which is important.
Yes, that's what I love about it. That's
Yeah.
what I love about it. And when Sean asked me if I would take over that part of it, I said I'm glad to. He said, yeah, because you're older than us and you lived all of this. You
Oh
lived
yeah.
a lot of this. And some of the people I talk about, I've played with, and I've at least seen them play. And I've, even with some of them, have sat down and had conversations with them because I want to understand things. I wasn't a big fan of Billy Higgins or a big fan of Ed Blackwell. But sitting down and having a conversation with them changed my whole perspective on what they were playing, and gave me a greater appreciation for what they were doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting what one conversation can do.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
information is key.
Yes, it is. Yes,
Yeah,
it
it
is.
really
It
makes a big difference.
is.
So from being a professional performer, doing that for so many years, that's your dream. That's what you decided to do, and then being, now being an educator, connecting those two, disciplines. How important, can you share with our audience how important being an educator is to you now at this point in your life, and how do you think your presence as an educator is influencing these young folks? Because I've asked these questions to a number of guests, because when we came up and when you came up, a couple of years before me,
Mhm.
jazz wasn't that prevalent in the education system. Now it is.
Right.
So can you talk about that?
Well, yeah, I will start with when I went to the University of Buffalo. Um, it was around 68 that Jackie Mack, they scouted Jackie Mack to come to Buffalo to set up a jazz studies department there. And
Okay.
then after that, Jackie got asked to go up to Connecticut.
Mhm.
And so Archie Shep came in and finished that up. And they were bringing in people from New York and all. And that's when I first started to see a jazz studies. When I first started at UB, they didn't have jazz studies department.
Right.
And but what happens with me in teaching college students, young players, and I have to always realize that the younger ones that come in, they're freshmen, so they're 17, 18 years old.
Mhm.
And what it has done for me, it has taught me how to also research what it is I want and need to do to share with these students
Mhm.
who really need to have what I've researched. Many times you get asked a question and you may not be able to answer the question. And I'll tell my students, if I can't answer the question, I'll go and get the answer and come back and let you know.
Right.
And so, but also to see how what you are able to express to them and give them, how it can come back to you differently,
Mhm.
like another way. And also to be challenged. And I tell my students, you're going to be challenged. So you can challenge me.
Mhm.
I said, as a matter of fact, if I tell you anything, don't believe it.
Right.
I'm saying don't believe it. Go in and
Yeah.
try to disprove what I'm saying to you. Just try to disprove it, and you will find the answer. And it always works.
Yeah.
I don't mind being challenged
Yeah.
because I know that. And well, the other thing that happens is that when they first come in to class, I let them know that I'm a father, grandfather, and great grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And I've raised 5 children. I got 12 grandchildren, all adults, and I've got 6 great grandchildren, and the oldest great grandchild is a sophomore in college.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So I let them know that whatever you're dealing with, I've been there. Either I experienced it or I've seen it experienced in my family. So if
Right.
you're going to try to put something over, I can see what's going on. Or
Right.
if you need some help, I can help to steer you towards finding the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's been helpful for me in that I have to be ready with my drum students, especially. I have to be ready because when I lay something on them, I have to be able to play it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have to play it myself.
Yeah. It's just that information you gave is key. I remember being a student in college, and even coming out of college, and when I came to New York, I studied 14 years with Michael Carvin. And every time I would walk out the door, he would say to me, remember now, go test what I say. Make sure I'm saying the right thing. Or if I'm not, bring it back to me. It's funny,
Yeah.
not too many educators kind of think like that anymore,
Mm.
because you want the students to be engaged. You want them to take that information and do something with it. In college, Keith Copeland used to say to me, man, if I give you this, do something with it. When I come back and hear you next week, when you come back to play for me my lesson, I don't, it's great if you could do what I did, but it would be greater. It would be better if you did something with it. And
Yes, yes.
that's kind of what the exchange should be. It's not just like do what I say and that's it. It's
That's it.
what are you going to do with that information?
That's
And
right.
I think that's the key to a great education system. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to get deep into it, but I think one of the things that's lacking is that the students aren't being challenged. A lot of them are just given the information and then they get a grade for it, and they're not being challenged
Right.
at a certain
Exactly.
level,
Exactly.
because of a lot of it has to do with rules and regulation and all of that. But that's why I just wanted to hear, excuse me, your take on it, because I know you come from the old school, and
Yes.
and what you present, and I've seen your product at hand, and we've had this conversation in the past and in other ways of how to deliver information. But it's
Yeah.
important for our audience to know that from an educator standpoint, being an educator, when you give information to a student, it's really
Yeah.
important if that student can come back with
Yes.
something that they've done with it. It really shows
Yeah.
that you delivered it the right way and you've
Exactly.
inspired and instilled in that student. You
Exactly.
know, yeah, it's just important. And
I feel that way too, man.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel that if the student comes back to me and they're better than me, that's what I want to get over. I want to make sure that they can go to where I am and go better. And so that's what that means, man.
yeah. I got I got cursed out one time from a former teacher of mine, because he went and subbed the gig I did, and I was doing some stuff that he taught me. He called me up,
Oh,
but it was a joke. He was like,
oh,
he
okay.
said, man, I gotta play this gig, and then he said, but man, I'm proud of you, man. You're kicking my ass. You're kicking my ass. I wasn't expecting it, man.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's and then we cut it up, and for like another 4 or 5 hours, we reminisced about us being, like him teaching me and just where I were in my life at that time
yeah,
and the growth, and so
yeah,
and he said, man, I always knew that you were going to find a way to
yeah.
figure it out, and
Yeah,
that's what you want as an
that
educator.
is. That's what
Yeah,
you want. That's what you
yeah,
want, man.
yeah. And I think you have done a great job inspiring your students on that level. I mean, I definitely see it and hear it in your son, and that says a lot. I've
Yeah.
taught I've taught the kids of other musicians, and they've always said, "D, I can't teach my child, man. You gotta, because it's hard when you're that close. It's really
Well,
like
it
you said,
is, and I've done that with Kush too. I
yeah,
didn't do it because I was so close to him that I couldn't give him everything he needed. I did it because I wanted him to have another perspective.
exactly,
I wanted him to
yeah,
have, I sent him to somebody that prepared him to play orchestrally, because I
right,
don't play orchestrally. And
mhm,
and then I sent when he was 6 years old, I put him in a piano class and he came home playing a song. I said, well, that's going to be your lesson too. So
Yeah.
he played piano. That's what got him into the performance school that he went to, because I didn't teach him mallets, so he had to do his audition on piano, and they didn't know that he played drums. They had
wow! So he got in as a piano student.
Got in as a pianist. Got in as a pianist.
See, I didn't know that.
He loved piano.
But you know, that's the other thing. As a drummer, you know, it's important to have that melodic foundation, because when I was learning music in elementary school, my mother made it very clear to my teacher that she did not want me to play drums at all, because like you, I had wrecked all the furniture. I was that kid, man. She would come home and the paddle would be coming out of the chair, and because you know that's what I wanted to do. And she's like, you know, single mom, you know, she's like, it's not happening. So by the time I really knew I wanted to play music, my teacher said, well, you can't play drums. And he was a trombonist, so I started off a trombone. I played trombone all the way up through high school. And took my first drum lesson in college, 18 years old, at Rutgers University.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, yep.
Wow.
Yep. So that's when
you got all your harmony and melody.
All of that, yeah. I knew music, I knew harmony. I went to Interlochen, you know, I learned theory and all of that stuff. And so I didn't get my first drum set until I was 18 years old in college. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't even say this, but you know, instead of paying for school, I took my student loan money and bought my first drum kit, and then went and got a job on campus to get on a payment plan to pay for school.
Yeah, man. No, man. That's what I did when I went to New York, man. I was using my school money to go live in New York.
Yeah, you got to figure it out. You got to figure it out. But
you got to figure it out, because you know where you want to be, what you want to do. I didn't know that about you, man.
Yeah. You know, similar. Yes and no. I have it, but I haven't played in years, man.
Okay.
Once I got on those drums, I was done, man. I was so focused. Yeah, I didn't even look back.
Yeah.
So, it's funny because right before I jumped on, I was listening to your music, and you inspired me. I got a bass line. I was humming this bass line. I was like, man, if you change this, can you change that? You do this? I said, oh, I got me a bass line now.
Well, I can't wait to hear it, man.
Yeah,
my bass line came from somewhere, you know.
Came from somewhere, man. But it's you get inspired in different ways, man, and that's how it works. But if you have the tools, you know what to do with it once you get inspired.
That's right. That's
right. Yeah, man. But we're short of time, man. Time is getting away, man. But you shared some music with us, and I want our audience to hear some of your wonderful music, because we didn't get a chance to talk about Supernova, but we have music of Supernova, so we can squeeze that conversation in. But I want to share this first song, and you could tell us about it after we play, because I don't want time to run out on us before we get everything we want to get in there. So let's play the first song, which is entitled Blues for Calvin, and then we'll talk some more, okay?
Okay. All right.
Great. Blues for Calvin.
Yeah, Blues for Calvin. You know what? Calvin was one of my professors at University of District of Columbia. When I got to Washington, I would go to him. James King, the bassist, said that they were having, Saturday morning jam sessions at the school. He invited me to come, and that's how I got with Calvin. Calvin played trombone.
Okay.
And he was a great trombone player, a great composer, and a great educator. And so I dedicated that to him. And you notice it had a bridge.
Yeah.
And Calvin liked blues with a bridge. And so that's how I came up with that. And that's why I named it after him.
Beautiful, beautiful. And who's in the band?
In the band is on trumpet was Josh Evans, Josh.
Yeah.
Joe Ford, who just passed away, on alto saxophone. James King on bass, and Alan Johnson on piano.
Alan Johnson. Okay. Beautiful. And this is your working band now, or that's just for the recording?
That's my working band. And now I have before Joe passed away, I did a gig. And when I brought in tenor to go with his alto and Josh. And then we did a gig at Blues Alley down here back in November, which was recorded live. And I just had Joe and Sean Jones on trumpet with Alan Johnson and James King. And so since that was Joe's last recording that I'm aware of, I've got to put it out. I've got to put it out. Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds beautiful. Beautiful. Well, let's continue. We have a song entitled The Covenant. Let's check out The Covenant.
Okay.
So that's the Covenant.
That's the Covenant, and that had Joe Ford again on alto, Gary Thomas on tenor saxophone, same rhythm section of James King and Alan Johnson, piano and bass.
Gary Thomas also, who's from that area, right?
Yeah, he's from Baltimore.
Yeah. You know, I'm enjoying this, man. And that's your band. That's the band SUPERNOVA, right?
SUPERNOVA. That is
so
SUPERNOVA.
Tell us about SUPERNOVA.
SUPERNOVA was inspired by Wayne Shorter, of course, the album that he came out with in 69, 71 called SUPERNOVA. And I said, what is a supernova? and when I, I was getting ready to say Google it. We didn't have Google then.
Right.
So when I looked it up, I found out that supernova is a burning star that burns out. And when it does and it explodes, it releases genetic material throughout interstellar space. We are all part of a supernova.
Wow.
That's how deep it is. So I like to think of it as a star that has burned out. And when you look up in the sky at night and you see a star that's shining bright, maybe that star has burned out. Probably hasn't, but it's burned out. But the light is still moving forward to us. And so I like to think of it that when people leave our concerts, the light is still with them, which is the music. So they're leaving the concert, hearing the music going over and over in their head. So that's how, and that's SUPERNOVA. So we're very explosive, but we're also tender too.
And I'm glad you said that, because as I'm listening to the music, I'm saying, wow, it's so much openness and so much space, yet the energy is just filling you up, and it's not overbearing. It's just there, and it's hard to capture that. I don't hear that often in younger musicians. When you hear space, you hear there's space, it's quiet, it's but is a thing with mature musicians where you can hear space, you can have space and openness and still have energy.
Yes. Intensity.
Yes. Intensity, yeah. Intensity doesn't necessarily, I learned this from fighters. Intensity doesn't necessarily needs to be means loud, playing loud. It just means intense.
Yes, but I had to learn that too.
Yeah.
That. I had to learn that, man.
But see, I think that's one of the things that I don't hear today in the music, because the intensity disappears when you play soft. And
yes,
I don't know if I'm explaining it right.
No, you are actually. The intensity has to be there, which is the intention, but it's not loud.
Yeah. The intention.
Intention is there. So it's like hearing great drummers, or great bands play piano forte and then play piano.
Yeah, exactly.
And like our Blakey, it will go up and down immediately.
Yeah. That's an art in itself, and I think it's important to the music, because that's something that helps to create that sound that you was talking about initially.
Yes.
Yeah, that intensity, the intention.
Yes,
it's important. I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge some of the comments that we're getting, because you have made an impact tonight. There's been some really great comments. I don't know if you've been checking them out, but
I have, and I see one person here who I'm great friends with, and you are too, Anthony Nelson.
Yes.
How you doing, Anthony? Good to see you, man.
Yeah, love the rhythm, the counter rhythms, bold and sophisticated.
Yeah.
Who's playing the horns? You mentioned both horn players. You can mention them again, and you're the real deal, bro. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Great jazz. Beautiful. Love the breaks and the well-timed solos. Yeah, man. Can't get enough of the real jazz. Yep.
Yes.
So. Yeah, I know that one got me too. I can't read that. Echoes of Coltrane and Davis in one group. And hey, man, see you soon on the 29th. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be there. That's Carl.
And Nassar, I must say, man, congratulations, man.
Well,
this show with you, we've hit over 200,000 listeners.
Oh, it's so wonderful. That's so wonderful.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you're doing it.
Well,
But
they
we
can
have
reach out
we
and
we
reach
have
out to you.
two more songs. I don't want to. We're gonna push this time.
We gonna push it, man. You gonna push it?
We're gonna push it. We're gonna push
Okay.
it. Yeah, I haven't got the hook yet, so we're gonna we
Okay.
haven't got the Apollo hook yet, so we're gonna keep.
All right. Okay.
I know it's been an hour, but let's just jump right into Diamond in the Rough. Let's do it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, man. That
Diamond in
was
the rough.
yeah. I want to make one disclaimer here. Maybe no one really noticed it, but after Joe heard this track, he became upset with me because he didn't like the fact that he was breaking up on a soprano. And this was our second take. But the first take, the soprano sounded great. But on the second take, the band sounded great. And so I had to make a executive decision.
Yeah.
And I sounded better on the first take too, but I had to find something. So and I'm saying that now because he plays such a great soprano. His soprano playing was supreme to the extent that he rarely played out of tune. You could always hear that he was in tune, and that's a hard instrument to play in tune.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, man. Beautiful song. Every single song has been great, and I just want to say, man, this is, as I'm listening to this, I'm reflected on McCoy Tyner's "Fly Like the Wind."
It's one of my favorite songs. Yeah. And you heard us play that song in Virgin Islands.
Yeah.
We played it then, you sure did, man.
Yeah. So I was reflecting on that, and I'm smiling. I'm like, wow, man, it's funny how you have these similarities in music, and you could just reference one song can influence another, but you have a way of doing that, with your music and just referencing some great things and just presenting some of your own as well. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I mean, unfortunately, our time is up. I had to push that last song that I needed to get that in there.
And it's my pleasure to be here with you, and I thank you for the invite. I am thrilled. Thank you very much. And someone wanted to know who that was on flute, and that was Jamal Brown. He's a Washington.
Jamal Brown. Okay. Jamal Brown on flute. Yeah, man. So but before you leave though, let our audience know how they can follow you. Any social media, website, please share that.
Well, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. My name, Nasar Abadey. I have 2 pages on Facebook because I have a big band, and that's on Facebook as well. But you put my name in, all of that will come up. And my website is my name, NasarAbadey.com. Just know that in my name, I've got 1 S and not 2 S's. So if you put 2 S's in it, I don't think you'll come up with it. But my name.com, NasarAbadey.com. I have my schedule there. But I also have where you can write me, and you can email me, Nasar at NasarAbadey.com. And I'll get it. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well, brother, Joe Ford soprano is still the go-to. Yeah.
Thank you, Anthony.
Well, man, it's you have no idea, man. It's been an absolute joy.
Someone asked me if I'm coming to New York soon, and I'm talking to a few people to come there, and just look out for us, okay? Thank you.
Great. Well, it's been an absolute joy having you on the show, and trust me, you'll be back again.
I look forward to it, man. Thank you very much. And to all of your listeners, your audience, I appreciate you taking the time to be here. And hopefully we can get together again, maybe live sometime.
Yes, sir. Right. Continued success to you and your group, SUPERNOVA, and all the best in the family as well.
Thank you very much, and success to you as well.
Yeah. Take care. Man, that was my good friend, Nasar Abadey. As you can hear, man, a wealth of information, great music. Great music and great conversation, man. We can talk forever, but unfortunately our time is up, so he had to leave. But come back next week and join Sounds of the Diaspora as we bring to you another great drummer, another great friend, someone that I ran into a couple weeks ago and haven't seen him in years, and I was able to convince him and squeeze him in for next week. So join us next week as we bring to Sounds of the Diaspora the great Ali Jackson from Detroit. Looking forward to seeing you then. Take care and all the best.